Good morning. We have got Maestro Hamilton Souther or Souther. How do you say your last name? Well, I'm going to let you
Souther.
Souther. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. If you'll just say your name and how you got here, and then we're going to dive deep into a conversation.
Amazing. Well, my name is Maestro Hamilton Souther, and I got here having practiced plant medicine for the last 23 years in Peru. And I'm the founder of Blue Morpho, and we host retreats both with Ayahuasca and San Pedro, as well as Amazonian plant medicine dieta. And we work in the Amazon and in the Andes outside of Cusco in the Sacred Valley. And we have courses to help people who have home practices learn how to sit for themselves and others and also become facilitators.
Beautiful. Now, it's my understanding that you are the first American maestro. Is that do I understand that correctly?
Uh, I'm the first person that we know of that made it through traditional Amazonian apprenticeship in a lineage and was given the title Maestro back in 2004.
What does that look like? Can you tell us what that process looks like?
Yeah, apprenticeship is an in-depth immersion and rite of passage where you participate in many plant medicine ceremonies, including ayahuasca ceremonies, as well as plant medicine dietas pretty continuously throughout a year. And, apprenticeship usually takes somewhere between 5 and 10 years. So you'll drink ayahuasca on average of 100 to 150 times a year and continue with plant medicine dietas the whole time. And you also experience other rites of passage that are there to help you mature and grow, that really take place in the forest, fasts and other means of proving your knowledge of the plants and that you have the capacities to perform the medicine.
So you went from Silicon Valley to doing this. Can you dive into a little bit of what was your catalyst to all this?
I grew up in Silicon Valley and kind of lived that lifestyle that you would imagine: school and sports and languages and the things that prep you for what's important in the US-based society. And the really pivotal moment, I think, came my senior year in college, where I was studying anthropology, but I had a mentor and a life planned out for me, and he died in the last semester of school, and I lost the direction that I had. And the year after, I was looking for that direction, and it was a difficult time. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. And my mom said to me, well, if you don't want your life anymore, just give it back to spirit. And so I gave my life back to spirit, not thinking much would happen, but I was dramatically impacted by the nature of that action. And that was the catalyst for beginning to understand altered states and awakening, which is now much more prevalent and common than it was in 2001, 2002. And through that process, I ended up heading down to Peru to learn more about what was taking place and also looking for training. And I found it in the Amazon.
You sort of went on to the last shaman, right? That sort of venture into the Amazon, looking for what we're all looking for.
I was looking for a teacher. I was hoping that somebody out there knew a little bit more about life and the cosmos and consciousness and than what I had been presented with growing up. I was really hoping there was a deeper knowledge to the notion of existence and why we're alive, living the lives that we're living. And I was really lucky to be able to find a true master who was in his mid 80s at the time that I met him and had lived a full life of medicine and the gathering of knowledge. And I was truly honored to get to live near him and work with him and learn from him.
I love that so much. I think that's what everybody wants. And I think the Western world has really, really dumbfounded us to who we really are. I mean, like you said in the beginning here, I mean, the Western world has trained us to indoctrinate us to their ways. And it's really crazy once you get in these medicines and you see these different paradigms and really what life's all about.
Well, and it's interesting how you say, your growing up was preparing for this life that in the United States we're supposed to have, right? I was grown up the same way. I went to preparatory school my whole life to prepare me for college, all girls school. I went to college to prepare me for life. I'm not doing anything that I studied. I mean, I'm using all the knowledge, obviously, from all of the years, but so tell me how your family feels with this path that you've gone down.
My family's actually really proud of it. Um, we were raised to travel and embrace other cultures, and I studied cultural anthropology as well as physical anthropology in the university. And I think early on, there was concern. Just, one thing is to go on a great adventure, and another thing is to tell everybody at home that you're not really coming back and that the adventure may last for decades, which it has, and I'm grateful for it. But my family came down to visit and see what we were doing, and they had the opportunity to participate in the plant medicine ceremonies and gain the perspectives that everybody has and shares when they participate in these ceremonies. And I think that became a real eye-opener and an opportunity to understand that there was something very special going on in these medicines and a real need to open people's awareness to them. And so I was supported by my family. I think there's a certain level of sadness to have to be separated by such geographic distance. And it would have
Sure.
been nicer to have been able to spend more time together, but the support was always there. And I'm grateful for it. I wouldn't have been able to survive apprenticeship and do what I did without their help.
How beautiful that they came down there and drank medicine with you.
Yeah, as soon as I was, here full time and told them what it was about, they all came to experience it with me.
That's incredible.
Well, you've created some pretty amazing things in this space. So let's start off with talking about Gaia Labs. I've heard of Gaia, and what is that all about?
Well, Gaia Labs is an extension of our work at Blue Morpho, where over the years I just had an opportunity to work with so many people of this amazing community. And I found out that people interested in plant medicine came from all different aspects of society. It wasn't an isolated group of people. There were people from every kind of profession and every kind of background. And there was a consistent need to explore more and receive healing from the medicines. And that helped me ultimately meet people in technology and Web3 and this whole new emerging space of cryptocurrencies. And I was very interested in the idea of money as the form of a spirit and these new emerging cryptocurrencies and distributed technology that transcended direct ownership from centralized companies. And it looked like a real expansion on our economic systems, which I thought were something that were archaic and we needed to evolve with. And here was this technology to do it. And so two co-founders and I formed Gaia Labs to develop in the Web3 space and really focus on core infrastructures that could help new financial technology layer for people.
That is incredible. It's so funny that you talk about this as we are in this space ourselves and struggle in just that aspect.
Totally. We'll talk about that after the call. You could definitely help us in that area for sure. We find that, and we'll just dive into that a little bit. A lot of people are trying to get in the psychedelic space right now. We all see the visions here. We all see people transforming. And, what's really hard is the government makes it very difficult to start a business in this space. Very, very difficult because of the restraints they put on you. And it's really mind-boggling. It's really baffling. It's baffling for me for one case. I look at psilocybin, and we'll look at psilocybin right now. You know, there's never been one clinical death from psilocybin ever. And we are in a space right now that it could help so many people. And the fight we're fighting is just unbelievable. And, it comes down to that. It comes down to the money, and it comes down to getting the money to grow these businesses. They kind of put they really they really have accomplished controlling that aspect of money, and it's really powerful.
Well, of course, they don't want us to heal. They realize these medicines heal and where's the money in that? And so the blockades that we come across daily in trying to get, and for us it's information education. I mean, of course there is mama dose and you know the psilocybin part of it, but for the most part Mark and I are on a mission to educate, inform, integrate. Education, information, integration, those are our three pillars. And even just with those three things, we get banned left and right. We get bank accounts shut down. We get payment processors shut down. It is absolutely insane. And yet the other day I see on Facebook somebody on there talking about vulgar things that he does to women, and he had 400,000 views, and that's no problem. But you get on there and you be a truth teller, watch out.
It's really different. So, with something we definitely would probably talk to you about after the show. But let's talk a little bit about Blue Morpho Academy.
Blue Morpho Academy is an academy I created to help educate people in the pillars that you're talking about. There's a new emerging space in plant medicines and psychedelics, which are legal. They're not illegal, and they're really exciting. And so when I looked at this vast expansion that was taking place in the psychedelic renaissance, that's the name given to it, I thought, well, the medicines will be universally produced and commoditized. And there will always be the Western medical need for the clinical, and the indigenous will always have the space that they merit. And we need to preserve that and support that in the preservation of culture. But then there's a huge middle ground between there of people who will access these medicines and need them. It's a great cultural sharing that's taking place. And I thought where we would have a lack of support was in the individuals that were trained with the right level of ethics and integrity, background, and experience that you would expect from apprenticeship. And so I thought that there was a big need and an opportunity to provide real education in a way that could support people that weren't going to be able to move somewhere else or live in the Amazon, to be able to have the kind of training to be a real expert in the space. And so we created a foundations course, and I created a facilitator level course. And I recommend them for anybody that has a home practice with any kind of visionary plant medicine or psychedelic. If you're going to do this for yourself or your friends and family, if you're going to do it experimentally, or you're going to travel to different centers and or circles and be part of this community, I think it's really important that you have the basic education and understanding how to set up a space and hold that space yourself, how to be able to sit for yourself through difficult times, how to be able to stay safe within your own psyche and your own spiritual energy in the presence of others, how to be able to understand dose and better manage your own dose and not leave all of those variables up to the circumstances of the circle that you're sitting in. I would like to see everybody there be experts and well-trained and understanding, and not just relying on one single leader that could be hit or miss in that situation, and also have a broad open dialogue about what we expect as a community and as a culture to be basic ethical and safety standards, and represent those within the community. And I think that that has to be represented by the individuals that are doing this. And I just think if we're going to be in a psychedelic society where there will be, 90+% of the youth experimenting and trying these different plant medicines or going to ketamine clinics, etc., there needs to be broader, general, and basic information that supports everybody to have both a safer and a more impactful healing experience that we know is possible from the medicines. And so I created the courses to be able to support people to have those experiences. They're online, they're self-paced, and that goes through all the theoretical information. And then there are modules on the practicum, or when you learn to use the medicines and how to use them wisely, as well as the opportunity to come down to the Amazon and receive direct teaching and mentorship from us at Blue Morpho.
That is absolutely beautiful. Which medicines are you talking about in particular, or just in general?
Well, we teach in the academy how to sit responsibly and safely with psilocybin, ayahuasca, San Pedro, and cannabis. And a lot of people don't even realize that cannabis is one of our most ancient spiritual medicines, and it is a visionary medicine in its own right. And so we teach it in the nature of the sacred container and how to be able to work with it intentionally. And I think the general information also then extends if you were going to sit with ketamine or MDMA or some of the other synthetics, you would be able to have the basis of the education to know, at least in the theoretical space, how to know you're safe and how to know to navigate the experience if it became difficult for any reason.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. You know, just talking on psilocybin for a minute, this is what we try to do is educate people that you can do this safely and you can do this by yourself. Now, we recommend obviously if you're going on heroic doses and things, you want to sit with people who know what they're talking about. But the whole point is we're taught from a young age that it is only the guy in the white coat that can help us. And that is just not true. We have all the answers within inside of us, and these medicines illuminate that and show us if we're willing to listen and watch. So we do the same thing, try to educate people on the medicines, on dosage, on all the things so they can take control of their own mental health.
Yeah, I think that's really important. You know, there's the cultures forming around this, and there's a huge microdosing culture. And then there's a lot of talk about the heroic or the really large macro doses. And I like to speak to a middle ground in there where there's very profound experiences for people that are safe to have, that allow the medicines to work within the brain and provide the awakening that happens in the brain and the mind and the ability to access the nature of that inner knowledge. I think it's really important to highlight that our body has an immune system and a healing system that, when allowed to heal, does if it can. And there's so many aspects now in our current modern societies that have toxins and certain limitations within them that really repress that ability within the body to heal itself. And then we're looking to external needs as a way to do that. And we need to get back into our natural rhythms with nature and tap into these ways to heal. And I learned that in the Amazon, that when somebody's sick, they get not just a day off or 2 days off, they get weeks off to be able to go into dieta and let the body, you know, heal itself. And then there's the introduction of very specific visionary plant medicines that help the body stimulate the immune system and be able to heal better, the natural healing systems, and then also healing the person's psyche and healing their spirit, which is often afflicted in, you know, different kinds of illnesses. And so I completely agree. It's necessary that people have access to real medicines, and the natural medicines are our oldest medicines. And I think it's really strange that our societies have cut us off from these medicines, and really just in the last 50 years. And that if we go back in history, there's evidence for thousands of years and possibly even tens of thousands of years of humans who are our ancestors utilizing these medicines. And it's just this time of great restriction that we've been living through, kind of like a dark age. And we're just now waking up from it, and making sure that people know how to use these is really important, especially when there's a well-trodden ancestral path to use these medicines that has happened for thousands of years.
Wow, you speak such the truth. You know, I mean, thousands of years. You know, if you look at how, just we'll talk like people don't want to talk about this, but if we talk about the Bible, just in general, we look at the Bible. If we look at what their sacrament was in the Bible, was the acacia tree. And you're going to tell me that all these visions they had, they would drink the sacrament of the acacia tree and they would have all these visions. So the Bible was really written off of psychedelic experiences in my thinking. And I love the fact how you endorse these indigenous tribes, because that's where really this all has come from. You know, this is where all our medicines have come from. You know, back in the 50s, they sent people out to the Amazon. They sent all these doctors and whatever out to the Amazon. They were watching what monkeys did, and they see what these birds would eat, and that they would do this. And that's how we've come up with most of our pharmaceutical drugs, you know, have come from these plants. But in turn, we go and we ban these plants. It is so obscured. It's so delusional. And like you said, it's been 50 years of darkness, and it's really has. It's been about since 1967. It's really started since then. And the war on drugs, by what the Reagans did, was total ludicrous to society.
But it worked. And what it did is that it convinced an entire generation that these are drugs, right? I mean, remember the commercials? I might be a bit older than you, but the commercials of this is your brain on drugs. You take LSD, you're going to jump out a window. I mean, this is what we were taught. Dare, right? And they did a good job. But and now we're here, as you said, the Renaissance, and to relearn what you know, because we've been lied to. But people are waking up.
I think it's important to understand that, modern societies all across the United States, Canada, Europe, have been under a tremendous pressure of propaganda and the nature of propaganda to change the way that we think. And when I grew up, I remember both those commercials, and I also remember that everywhere there were drugstores, and I didn't know what a pharmacy was. And then I remember when all of a sudden there were no drugstores and there were pharmacies everywhere. And that's just rebranding. That's not changing the nature of what's sold there. It's just changing the name of what somebody thinks and associates with what's sold there. And I grew up in a Western medical family that understood the importance of medicines, where medicines were understood as certain kinds of drugs. And there were drugstores, and you got the appropriate kinds of medicines that you needed when it was important to have them. And we also embraced natural medicines, all the different ways that nature had already provided for us the kinds of support that we needed, simply in the forms of the foods that we ate and the different kinds of teas and tinctures and poultices and visionary plant medicines that you could encounter whenever there was an actual need. We had a medical understanding of the use of all different kinds of medicines, which is very different to a recreational drug culture, which takes these substances for mind-altering purposes or enjoyment or entertainment. I'd always come from a medical background associated with them. And when I came to the Amazon, I saw that reflected. In the Amazon, there was no Western drug culture once you got into the forest. That was an advent in the cities. You would see drug use in the cities, but as soon as you got into the forest, it didn't exist in any kind of form or way. And only in the towns would you see the kinds of alcoholism that you would associate back to also the urban environments. And it was really interesting to get into the forest and see where there are thousands of plant medicines, not just a few, there are thousands, and a much smaller number of them are visionary ones, but they all are incredibly potent medicines. And people understood how to use them. If you had a stomach ache, if you had cramps, if you had, diarrhea, if you were vomiting, if you had a fever, they would have a concoction of plants to be able to give you that all of them had purpose and merit, and to be able to see that they were used in a medicinal capacity. And I think we've just gotten distanced from being able to understand the importance of our medicines and our right to be able to use them. And I think it's a fundamental right. And another thing that I loved in the Amazon was that the medicinal practices were not differentiated from their spiritual practices. So if you look at, the laws within the United States under freedom of religion and the Freedom of Religion Referendum Act, that if you have a sincere spiritual belief and practice, that's allowed under the practice of your religion. And the visionary medicinal plants were considered to be spiritual in their nature. So if you worked with ayahuasca, or you worked with San Pedro or sanangos or mapacha tobacco, that was considered a sacred spiritual event that also happened to have medicinal properties and qualities to it that would be part of your healing experience. And so I think it's really interesting that we actually preserved the right to use these plants in their traditional nature, yet we were taught a completely other path and way of thinking about it that was highly propagandized and didn't really support the truth that sits behind them. When I learned from my maestros, they explained that the medicines were spiritual in their nature, and you had to come with them with sincerity and true intention from the heart to be able to access the wisdom and the knowledge and the medicine that they had for them. And it was really special for me to realize that there's a sacred component along with working with this, and we do have right and access to it when we work with it that way.
It's such a sacred component. And then I think, me and Michelle always talk, and this is why we started all these things 7 years ago, is the visionary part of these medicines, the psychedelic part. Yeah. The biggest thing the Western world misses when you come off these medicines is the integration. It's so important. It's the most important thing. And I mean, all retreat centers, they all do it. We all miss that boat. And it brings it all together. And it's so important to utilize that. You know, it's so important that we understand that integration's the key. 4, 5, 7, whatever hours in the medicine is just a time. It's just a time and place. It's the integration that's the most important.
Yep. So we believe in the integration. It is the entire reason why we started the plant medicine path. And what I was saying was, if you go on one of these psychedelic experiences in that snow globe and you want everything to settle, and it's the first week, however long after that experience, your brain is doing all the things, and what you put in there is so important. So important. Integration is the key. It is the key. The time on your mat, that's the smallest part of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's only a few hours, and the time on the mat and in the visionary medicines opens you to a whole new set of understandings about yourself and the world, and a greater cosmic vision that opens you up more to being alive, your existence, and the universe itself, and your deep relationship with that. And then, you're left with the question, now what? And the now what is the rest of your life. And what a beautiful understanding that from that moment forward in your life, that gets to be the rest of your life. And I think often we think about the experience from the visions, but we don't think about it from the brain chemistry. And I like to think of the brain as this really sophisticated aspect of us that has all of this energy and light shooting through it, and these really complex cocktails of our own molecules and neurotransmitters. And it's through that we're thinking and speaking and finding our emotions and our personality. But deep inside it, it is really subtle. It's the gentlest, most subtle, beautiful part of us. I like to think from the visionary sense, like at each end of your neurons are these exploding rainbows, these incredible fractals that we see in the visions, and it's all right there. And so you want to give that part of your brain time to rest and build your new neural net and continue moving past the default mode network and being able to communicate in different parts of the brain. And the snow globe analogy is perfect for it, because that's exactly what's happening inside your brain. And it affords you this ability to build a new neural net and have your brain work not only better, but in ways that it never could work before. And so that integration process is so important. And here, the first element of it is to get ample rest and to know that you're in the nature of that process. And then on top of that, we can bring in the psychological processing, as well as how to relate to the really big visions that people have. And so I just second the importance of integration and giving it the amount of time that it needs.
Got emotional when you said that about, when you come off of the mat and it's like you have the rest of your life in front of you. And it's exactly what happened the first time I did ayahuasca is when I came out of that experience. It was like, holy shit. And I get emotional every time I think about that. And you put it so beautifully, because that is, if you are willing to listen, and you have to be willing to listen and surrender. And if you do those things, then you're right. Your whole life starts.
My first ayahuasca ceremony was exactly the same way. I had very little preparation. It was in, late 2001. I knew very little about ayahuasca, and I found myself in the Amazon in this opportunity to drink in the forest itself with an ayahuasquero, and it was just the ayahuasquero and me. And I sat back and had the experience, and the last visions I had was that I was going to live there and stay there, and I was going to ultimately learn and train. And I thought it was an impossibility. It had been the hardest, but also the most beautiful experience of my life. I had no context for it. I just knew after it that the world that I thought I knew was just the thinnest veil to something much deeper and more profound that had been unveiled to me and that I had awakened into. And it turned out that it all came true. Right there was where Don Julio lived, just 500 yards away. And he was the great grandmaster who taught me. And that ability to listen in there is so important, that there's a deeper intelligence that we can access. And it shows us who we are and what is coming next for us, and to embrace that about our lives, I think is the most orienting and special thing that we can experience. So I'm just so glad you got to have that experience too.
Isn't that what life's truly about, though? Isn't that what we're missing? That wholeness of what we're supposed to be?
I like to think that where we are right now in history is going to give us an opportunity to learn so much more about life, and that what we've been living is a time of great turmoil and war, and we're transitioning hopefully out of that. It might take us a while to do it, but there's got to be a greater purpose than just what our culture and society teaches us that life is. In my early 20s, I felt like it was a veil over my eyes that was blocking reality from me. And I finally realized through the visionary plant medicines that there is a much deeper reality, and that the veil that I had been seeing was my limited mind and imagination that had been created through education and the life that I had lived. And I needed to open up to much greater awareness and possibilities. And the visionary plant medicines helped with that. And I think the true purpose to our lives is recognizing that we're not alone and that we're part of something much greater, and that our ancestors have talked about it the whole time. And we've just turned off our ears, and we've become, blind to the truth, and we've become blind to our hearts in the last, 5 or 6 or 7 generations, as we've all lived through incredible turmoil and great intergenerational trauma. And I'm loving to see that millions of people are now awakening from this, and that the awakening isn't just for a special few people, but really it's happening for the majority of people who embrace these medicines. And it's happening inside ayahuasca circles, psilocybin circles, San Pedro circles, on the daily basis. And I'm just grateful for that, because life has to be more than just the accumulation of property until you die and give it away. I just knew it had to be, and I'm so glad that it is.
What a great conversation this has been today. Maestro Hamilton, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. I hope that you will come on again. If you will let us know where we can find you one more time.
Well, thank you so much, Mark and Michelle, for having me on the podcast. And it's been a joy to have this conversation with you. And if you're interested in coming on any of our retreats, you can find us at bluemorpho.org. And if you're interested in our courses, bluemorphoacademy.com for both the foundation and facilitator level. And if you want to learn more about me, hamiltonsouther.com. Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure to share this conversation, and I look forward to many more.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a great conversation today. Looking to talk to you again more.
We definitely hope you'll come back, and maybe we'll come see you in Peru.
And thank you for joining Mark and Michelle with Medicine with the Metals. Ciao.